Good afternoon. Hello.
Good
Good
afternoon.
afternoon.
Very happy to have you with us in Dubai, and welcome. We're discussing today the trajectory of streetwear in the very recent years, which has, at least in Western markets, experienced somewhat of a decline with a hype that seems to have died down, but the industry is thriving in places that people wouldn't expect. And so we'll discuss together the geographical decentralization of streetwear through your respective positionings. There is several discussions on online forums, and it is a recurrent theme that streetwear could be dead. And I would love to get your thoughts, all of you, on this strong affirmation.
Sure. I mean, we were discussing this a bit back, and it's like, one of those statements that obviously it was a really good headline and, caught a lot of attention. And, we were discussing, it's interesting because streetwear, at least, for me growing up, was, well, you couldn't wear it to the office. We couldn't wear it to work. And I was actually just looking it up on ChatGPT before this. And my first job was at Macy's, and I was a buyer. And even though I bought Nike and all the sportswear brands, I was in a tie and shirt every day, even for buy meetings. And I just looked it up, and actually in 2022, they changed it. But up until then, only on Fridays could you wear denim. And so it's like, streetwear is sort of dead because there's nothing really you can't wear to the office anymore. So I think that's the idea. But streetwear sort of evolved. I mean, we all sort of, work in the space, and none of us are in sort of the traditional, the hoodie or the baggy jeans. So streetwear sort of merged into fashion, into tailoring, into everyday. So I think I think the idea of streetwear was something that was like banned from the office, and that's not really the case, which is why it's dead, but it's just evolved, like you were saying, into something very different, something that's more accepted. And yeah, so that's what I think is, that's why it's dead, but it's just different, Yeah.
You're right, see?
Yeah, I feel like streetwear as we know it is dead. So in terms of how it started and everything, it's not exactly what it used to be. Now it's more of like an expression of young people and community, and it's coming from different subgenres from across the globe. So streetwear is dead in the sense of what it was, but in the sense of now, there's so many different subgenres of it, from emo streetwear to luxury streetwear. Obviously, still the culture streetwear, which is where it started from. So, yeah.
Hey guys. So I think when you look back in the 80s and the 90s, when we got Stussy, Supreme doing t-shirts and hoodies, I think it's all a part of a subculture, a small group of people who have interest in common. But I think this type of persons getting older, so they have new tastes and they have to evolve. So in that sense, I think we, as streetwear brands, sometimes we have to study a little more patterns and fabrics. That's why I think we have deep into new shapes other than t-shirts and hoodies. I think that is what we are looking to.
Yeah, I think its evolution is quite interesting to witness. And when the argument does come on the table that streetwear could eventually be dead, it's mostly because of a lack of interest from the youth in this Western market. Would you say that in your respective markets, it is close to its core purpose, which is representative of youth, of culture, and eventually infused by the street itself rather than inspired by it? Like, is it serving its core purpose?
I don't know, it's interesting, right? Because I mean, I think especially for India, it's so young, and we always say at so veg and non-veg, we just refer to VNV, but we always say at VNV, it's like we're sort of trying to create the environment where people can come and write India's chapter on streetwear. So I think it's still very evolving, and it's still representing a very small population of people, but it's more like an educational thing. So like me and my co-founder, we founded VNV. We were working on other stuff. I was working on apparel, and he's a creative, had a creative agency. And so we sort of just wanted a separate thing to share our love for sneakers, in the space. So I think it just became that. And we've been very conscious of trying to keep it as something that remains as that. Like, it is purely it's not something we're trying to scale. So it is speaking to a small population, and from that, hopefully other people will have a way to meet other people and start their own brands or start their own stories around it. So I think it's not reflective of a large population per se, but I think that's why it's interesting in our territories that it's still so young. Whereas, if you're in London, you'll see a lot of people that have grown up with that. In India, they haven't. So I think that's why it's interesting. It's not reflective of a big population, but of a small niche, which is, I guess, what makes it still exciting in a way,
Sorry, can you repeat the question again?
Yes. So I asked if you would say that in Nigeria for you, in Lagos, would you say that the streetwear there is more representative of its core primary purpose, which is representing the youth, culture, in comparison to eventually Western markets where it has become completely part of the luxury positioning?
Definitely, because like he said, it's very, very new. It's still like very raw, very authentic. There's no manuscript to what the streetwear brands in Nigeria are doing. It's never been done before from Africa as a whole, not just Nigeria. So kids are able to just express themselves using their culture, using what they see on the internet, and are just able to just be free. And I feel like that's the difference between what's happening in these emerging countries compared to what's happening in the West is it doesn't have to be a certain way. You're making up the rules as you go, which is really incredible to see. And yeah.
Would you agree with Sao Paulo?
Yes, like in Brazil, we have a strong community of surfwear in 20 years ago. Now I think streetwear in Brazil, especially in São Paulo, we have like 15 years of histories. It's very, very new. As you all guys said, I think we have to deepen our roots. For me, for example, I'm mixed race, so half of my family is from Japan and half is Italian with Portuguese. And I think in Brazil, everybody is mixed. So Brazil has the largest community of Japanese people outside Japan. So I try to bring this narrative to my designs, to my clothing and collection. So I think this is what makes our brand. I'm telling by myself, but I think what makes my brand unique is my story, and this is my truth. So a lot of brands that I compete in São Paulo and in Brazil, they have their own story, and we have to improvise because we doesn't have like how can I say this? But it's not easy for us to buy the same fabrics as an American brand could buy, or as a European brand, or even a Japanese brand. Everything is more, I will not say easy for them, but they have more access to this kind of fabric. And in Brazil, we have to be creative with what we got. So I think this is what makes us unique. We have to be creative. We have to think outside the box to make our brand stand out. So that's why I think we can talk to the niches. We are making some noise. So yeah, I think in general, I agree with them.
Yeah.
If I can just add, like in India, there's, we also do like a Converse business, and you see with like in India, you won't see people wear white shoes as easily. And like for Converse and Nike, the white Air Force One and the white Chuck 70 is like very important. But in India, just because, and that's like unique to India. I remember when we started VNV like almost 9 years ago, you couldn't gift a pair of shoes because in India it was considered like bad luck. You couldn't receive a fair. So actually someone would give a 1 rupee coin back. Like it's just so it wouldn't be free. And that's changed now. Now that's not the case anymore. So you just see these quirks that come up, and that's the evolution of this category of streetwear where people make it their own. A lot of people that like I work with, two-wheelers are really big in India. And so like in New York, I would see, a lot of people would wear sneakers, come into office and change into dress shoes. Here, they would have sort of a beater pair they would wear on their motorbikes to change the gears and then change when they got to the store. So it's like you see these things that makes streetwear your own, and that just happens over time, Yeah.
I think it's interesting that all three of you highlighted the fact that there is indeed a culture that streetwear is infused and inspired by, but there's also the culture of appropriating streetwear in your respective environments. Yeah. I'm very curious to also understand what makes streetwear in your spots unique and exciting. And Ireti, I have a question for you actually. I'm very curious to understand the importance of African heritage and the correlation with the diaspora as well, since you're also between the UK and Lagos, into, gathering and bringing people together under Street Souk.
Yeah, I feel like the African heritage is super important because that's where we get our authenticity from. That's what differentiates us from the rest of the world. And through being Nigerian, like our stories are different, the way we see things are different, and just our nature is different. As Nigerians, we're naturally very like loud and boisterous people, so that is going to be reflective in the kind of clothes that we wear. I know I'm kind of subtle today, but usually I have like a lot more going on in terms of my outfit. And just being from both places, and places like London and other cities like New York having big African populations in there, being able to connect with people from across the world through the shared love of streetwear, the shared love of your African heritage, people who have not necessarily been back home and stuff, now being able to be like, oh, there are people out in Nigeria who are actually from where I'm from, who like the things that I like. How can I connect with them? And there's a platform like Street Souk that is showing you that there are these brands back home that don't have that much, but they're doing so much. And if they're given that platform or that opportunity, they would literally be on par with brands from anywhere else across the world.
Yeah, I think it is indeed a tool for social and cultural assertion, because as a creative, the first outlet of expression you often have in fashion is indeed streetwear.
Yeah.
And that's actually what brings all of us together. Felipe, you mentioned your Nipo-Brazilian heritage and the fact that Brazil has the biggest Japanese population outside of Japan.
A lot of.
How does that Japanese heritage translate within that Brazilian ecosystem? And how do you cultivate that niche? Because I'm guessing you're talking to a very specific crowd.
Good question. I think my brand speaks through me and throughout my products. So as a brand, we have like a sense of representative. We represent those individuals. Just to have context, guys, when you go to Japan, being Japanese, you're like a Brazilian. You're called like gaijin. And when you are in Brazil, you're called Japanese. So sometimes we are nobody, So I think my brand is to highlight those individuals who are somebody, and we are Brazilians with Japanese heritage, and we try to bring this to the table for people who could be proud of it. So I think my brand has this paper, I would say. So, and in that sense, we became like, I think, the biggest brand in Brazil who tells this story. Of course, I think we are inspiring some younger designers who are trying to build this narrative, but I think we are the ones that started to do this. And nowadays, other Asian people are willing to buy, and they're liking our story. So I think that's what's really interesting in becoming like that. So we started as a mixed Brazilian-Japanese, with a lot of Japanese sending me DM about that. But nowadays, like South Korean, Chinese, a lot of Asian people are gathering our brand. So I think our strong community is building about these Asians who lives in Brazil, but they are not recognized as Brazilians, So we're trying to build something like that through our community and through the products.
So what I pick up from each of your perspectives is that I think in each of your regions and parts of the world, streetwear has enabled you to best be understood as a language as well. What has compelled each of you to launch your businesses?
I mean, for us, we just didn't have a platform that, where people that had some history in footwear, sneakers, whether from a sport or cultural perspective. So that's when we started it 9 years ago. And I'm looking at some of these images behind us, and so that's from Air Max Day last year. And that image is like, you sort of always come to in young places. It's like the quote, imitate before you innovate. and you just iterate over time, and then that imitation of like using either skateboarding or beatboxing or anything that becomes your own over time, and it only happens over time, and so we started because we wanted to share that love that we had with people, and sort of we just went from there. Yeah.
When I started Street Souk, honestly, I was 18. I just was really in love with streetwear, and I realized no one I had a bunch of friends that had brands, but there wasn't really a place like Oxford Street in London or so that you could go to and go buy a streetwear brand or anything. And I just decided that this something like this should exist, but obviously we didn't have that infrastructure at the time to have a physical permanent store. So I decided to create this pop-up, which turned into a convention where we allowed brands initially it was only brands from Nigeria as far as my reach was. And in the first year, we had just about 35 brands from people who I messaged, people who knew about it and stuff like that. And, it started off really small and really cute, but as the years went on, we saw that streetwear was something that wasn't just Nigeria focused as well, like the whole of Africa. There were kids in all these different places who were really interested. And, we had the last convention and we had over 150 brands, over 1,000 applications, and 8,000 people come to this event. So it's just shown us that there's been so much growth in it since the beginning. And I just started it to just have a place for young people like myself to feel like we belong somewhere. We dress a certain type of way. Our hair is a different color from the norm, and we just want to be celebrated. We want to celebrate our culture, our heritage, and tell our stories from our perspective.
So my interest in fashion became through music. I used to play drums for hardcore bands. And when I was young, used to see how the musicians would wear some outfits, and I was trying to buy those clothes. But in Brazil, we have not a strong currency. So everything that we have to buy outside Brazil is very expensive. So in that sense, I saw the opportunity to build a brand from the ground. We started as a footwear brand, and then we evolved as a lifestyle brand. But I think it was that it was so expensive to buy any type of T-shirts or sneakers abroad. So I built myself the brand.
Would you say that streetwear in your respective markets is driven by more authenticity and a desire to be seen? And how do you see this expand globally beyond these hubs?
Yeah, there was something, the Murakami, this artist, said, and I'm pretty sure it was him, and he said that he got into sneakers because, in Japan, that's the community that accepted him early on, when he was obviously much younger. I think that's sort of what is probably for all of us is, you find your communities, and for me it was, it was sport or sneakers, and that sort of was what brought us in. And you had a question earlier, and I'm pretty sure this is the right stat, but in India, if you remove the top 10%, the GDP per capita drops by 60%. So like streetwear is still very small, in India, and I think that's part of what's exciting, but it doesn't really reflect all of India yet in any way. And and I think that's why it's interesting in our regions is because it's still so young, and it's still so it still has a lot to grow. So sort of two questions at once. Yeah.
What is one message you would like to communicate to shoppers and business execs in the West on things they have done that you have witnessed clearly failed and you've done differently?
Believe in the power of community, believe in the power of youth-led, a youth-driven initiative, and Africa is really on the rise. And I believe that in the next couple of years, because so many things like even online shopping didn't exist 5 years ago, so 10 years from now, the opportunities are endless. So invest in Africa, invest in Nigeria. Yeah.
I think the same as Iram showed the graphics behind. So I think Brazil is one of the spots to invest, and I think Brazil is a brand that everybody's talking about. So look into the brands that are true to themselves, telling true stories. That's what we're trying to do, to build.
Guys, thank you for... And maybe you had something to add?
No, it was great, yeah.
Thank you for sharing your respective perspectives with us, and congratulations on everything you're achieving in
Thank you.
your markets.
Thank you.